Hello, hello, welcome. And this is the Destiny Show, the show that heals hearts, minds, and souls. Tonight, we're talking about grief, a process that occurs when there's a loss, a pain, some sort of terrible torment that has happened that causes a person to feel lost and unable to process what has happened. On the show tonight, I have a special guest, Mr. Nate Jenkins.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you tell us a little bit about you and the work you've done with mental health?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nate Jenkins. I am a former mental health professional, also a business development professional in the D.C., Maryland area, and somewhat of a radio personality myself. I have a show called Politicking Our Way, where we would discuss politics of the day. But today it's about grief, with it, which is a great topic and something that I'm encouraged to dive into.
Yes. Well, there are five stages of grief. We have the denial stage, anger stage, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So, Mr. Jenkins, can you go into what the categories of grief that a person experiences due to a loss or a loss of a loved one, or you could say loss of a job or loss of an animal, where these five stages occur in that grief process?
Yes, I can do that. Well, here's the thing. Let's kind of clear the air about grief. Most people believe that grief is a result of a big tragedy. Mostly we're associated with death. That is a grieving and mourning process needed there. But grief as an essential is an emotional response to loss, any type of loss. We grieve daily as human beings.
Yes.
Most people don't believe it, but it's just like anger. We are angered daily. I don't care how nice you are and how kind you might be, but we experience anger every day. We experience grief every day. We just experience it at different levels. But the beautiful thing about grief, and it is a beauty to it, it's a science to it, that each of the five stages are into play. They are a part of the reality, regardless of what the loss may be. The stages don't have any time frames associated with them. It is a personal endeavor.
Yes.
So, quite naturally, as you go through the processes of grief, those stages of five, the first one, of course, is denial. When something happens, the first thing we do as a natural reaction is to deny the fact that the actual loss took place.
Right.
Because no one wants to lose anything. Now, losses can be a physical loss from you lost your keys, you lost a pet, I misplaced my wallet. All those things are grieving possibilities. It's a loss. You no longer have control or possession of something. So the grieving process starts then.
Right.
Okay. One thing about the whole denial situation is we're really looking at something that's real, but because it doesn't agree with us and our current state, we don't think it's a genuine occurrence. So what we try to do is process that thought to match how we feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates denial because you can actually see it being what it is.
Right.
But we're going to continually tell ourselves that can't be true. And a prime example, and one of the ones that's mostly noted, is when you get bad news. When you receive news about a loss, one of the first natural reactions is, no, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Oh my God, are you serious? That didn't happen to so-and-so. When did they pass? I just saw them. You know, we go into all this rationalization to try to move away from the fact that a loss has occurred. Okay? So once we get kind of through the denial stage, right, then the next one we get a little angered because we're irritated.
Right.
You know, we got to understand what anger is. It's not rage. Rage is a whole different monster from anger.
Yes, it is.
It is a reactionary mode of thinking because we can't resolve anger. We move into rage. But most people think I'm mad, so I'm angry. Anger normally starts at the point of irritation. That starts at the point of disagreement. So if I'm in denial about a loss, I surely can't agree that the loss exists. So I get angry
Right.
because now, first, I don't believe this has happened.
Mm-hmm.
I have no control over it happening or the outcome of why it happened. So my natural response is to be negative towards whatever the loss is. So I become angry, right? These are all natural happenstance. You can be the most kindest person in the world or the most cynical person in the world, even the most maniacal, evil person in the world. It doesn't matter. These 5 stages are going to happen. Now, your own personality, your own spirituality and belief may shorten or extend these stages.
Ooh, now, I like that part. I like that so much because when I was going through my loss of my daughter's murder, and I remember speaking to you on this, and you were asking me about the different stages of the process that I was in when we first met. And I told you, I said, well, I don't think that I even had enough time to actually grieve. I said, because I had to jump into the mother mode very, very quickly because I had a 9-year-old that I had to protect and take care of immediately. So I took myself out of the equation and I hurried and put her into counseling. And I had to speak, I had to read, I had to pray, I had to do everything I had to do at that time to protect her fragile mind because she saw what I saw. And for me to be able to give her the reality of that this is not your fault, because the first thing she started to say was, "Oh, Mom, why why she didn't come and talk to me? I could have helped her. I could have done this. Oh gosh, Mom, why?" And I had to actually tell her the truth, 100% the truth of what domestic violence was. And that's a stage, I don't care who you are. You never want to be in a predicament where you have a fragile child in front of you, just witness a murder, and then they're taking it on themselves.
Well, what I want to say to you, Christy, is simply yourself and your child were grieving.
Yes.
And grieving as a process may be lifelong for you, for most of us as parents, right?
Yeah, I grieve on a daily.
There is no cutoff. There is no cure. There is no now is the time to stop mourning. Those types of behaviors are dangerous because grieving in itself is more of a self-awareness and cleansing and setting right based upon the loss.
Right.
So as we move through the stages of grief and we go from denial to anger, we get to bargaining. What if I would have done this? What if I had been there? Would this loss have taken place differently? Would the loss happen at all?
Right.
Had I been a better person, maybe these situations would not have taken place. That bargaining is our way of trying to make ourselves feel better by taking on some of the responsibility, but also to compartmentalize the actual loss itself. And the longer we stay in bargaining, the more we start to believe our own rhetoric, which can be dangerous.
And that's the reason why I immediately had to step in and I had to remove my 9-year-old out of that situation of bargaining and thinking it was something she could have done, and let her know that it's not her fault and who was actually responsible. Let her know that that's the cause.
Yes. Now it's imperative that you'll move from bargaining to depression. Depression, as we know it today, is more physical and spiritual in nature than it is mental. It may start as a mental occurrence, but as we know physically, the parts of your brain that handle your behavior start to be a little erratic, and some of the dopamines and some other physical elements of the brain are released inappropriately that sadden you.
Yes.
Okay. So what happens is as we continue to make bargains, we don't win.
Mm-hmm.
And it depresses us. Because if we can say, what if I'd done this? Or what if this happened? Well, the what ifs never occurred. So the next phase is naturally for you to become somewhat saddened by the fact that my bargaining never happened. I could not have changed this situation of loss. So as a result of the bargaining now taking us to a place where we're saddened,
Mm-hmm.
it is a total responsibility for the person that is currently grieving to participate in their grief.
Yes.
One of the things that we don't want to do and be very careful of is trying to manage someone's grief. It is a personal activity.
Yes.
And as much as we think we know an individual, like our children,
Mm-hmm.
and we try to manage their lives as they're growing, how they process thought and how they grieve is personal.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And
Yes,
the
it
best
is.
thing we can do is lend our knowledge, our support,
Mm-hmm.
and move them along as best we can as we're also grieving.
Yes.
You know, a lot of parents, when they go through losses, they get active, like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to tell you, as proud as I am of your activities, that this is all a part of your grieving process.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And I can remember when we were speaking on the different griefs and my stages and process of where I was at the time. And I told you, I said, well, I was blessed to be able to get grief counseling and bereavement counseling at the same time from the counselor that was treating my daughter. And I said that I couldn't have not chosen the best counselor at that time for my situation. I said because only God placed this particular woman into our counseling path to provide the particular counseling that we needed. And I can remember praying to God, and I was saying, well, God, I say that I have to have a counselor that's a Christian counselor and someone that understands loss, death, grief, and bereavement. I say because at this time, I cannot go from counselor to counselor. I say because I don't have time for it. And so I was able to call this particular place. I remember I was Googling online different counselor areas, and I just found this particular one that said Christian counseling.
Okay.
And I called that number and I told them what the situation was and that I needed a female counselor and that I needed one who was a Christian and I needed one that was a parent as well, and I needed someone that understood the particulars of loss, grief, and bereavement. I say because I have a 9-year-old that I have to bring in immediately. And the intake person that was on the phone, she said, yeah, I got the best counselor for you. So she was going down the latest details, and she was like, and then she's a pastor. I said, yes, book me with her. And so we did a year of weekly counseling sessions. And thank God that I was able to process so much and to give my daughter, give my 9-year-old at that time the proper attention needed. And I want to thank you as well because I know that you give me a lot of counseling, and you might not actually realize it, but I remember calling you and telling you that my daughter's abuser had murdered another woman.
Right.
And you started to give me some counseling over the phone, and you told me some things to do, and you said to me, you said, well, Christy, you know, this is part of your grieving process. And the reason why I'm crying and feeling so sad about the other woman is because my heart is in it. And that my goals were to save other women from him.
Hmm.
But God fixed it to where he could never hurt anyone else. And so I was like, oh, thank you. I really needed that. Yay. And now he is in jail on a no bun, and no one can bond him out. And he's going to stand trial for the current murder as well. And they're reinvestigating destinies.
Excellent, excellent. Well, here's the thing. Because of your spirituality in your life,
Yes.
it was very important for you to have a God centered relief scenario through your counseling.
Yes.
Grief is definitely tied to the way you process your life, the way you live, the way you think, the way you order your steps
Yes.
will be exposed in times of despair. And grief is definitely one of those times. But the beautiful part of grief is that it is a learning and building moment for the individual.
Yes.
So if you're really in tune as you're going through the process, and this is mostly done retrospectively, when you start getting in the acceptance mode, meaning I couldn't have changed it, it happened under God's direction
Yes.
because he is the ultimate authority.
Yes.
Sometimes whatever we lost, he planned the loss for us, maybe not in a way that we agree,
Oh yeah.
okay? But he may have needed that angel back with him. So whatever methods he used for it to happen definitely did not agree with our plans for that same angel.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But once we get to acceptance based upon our own spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
it shortens the grief because now grief is shared, right, with your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything else. If you carry a weight by yourself, it's quite heavy. The more hands on the weight, the less work it is for you, even if they're just the spiritual hands of God. Okay? So, what I would employ anyone that's going through a loss not to go through it by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's an old saying that says, the person who created the problem can't be the person that fixes it.
Yeah.
Because if that was true, it wouldn't be a problem to start with.
Right.
Okay? So we want to understand grief does a few things. It allows us to process the loss and get back to some normalcy so we can continue to live. But it also educates us on a few things. One of the things it does, it alerts us to where we are spiritually connected to our higher power.
Mm-hmm.
How much leaning do we do during these times of despair on someone outside of ourselves? It also alerts us to our awareness and self-fortitude to recognize when we do need help as a person, right? So one of the most beautiful things I believe in your situation was that you had another child to tend to.
Yes, and also my higher power with God as well, and with me going to God immediately after the situation, during the situation, and even now, because I still have such a high level of spirituality that I deal with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's so remarkable. I just can't go another day with not just giving God thanks, because I experience it every day and I love it, and it's just a wonderful thing when you can reach up to heaven and God can pull you through and show you his wonderful works in heaven, and you can look down and you can see the earth and the people in it. That's what God did for me.
Okay.
And oh my God, it was such a relief of the broken heart that I had. And on a daily basis, I'm just so happy. And when I pray, I pray to God, and I thank God for giving me the wonderful child, daughter, and woman that Destiny was on earth, and the woman she is now in heaven, and her work that she's doing in heaven is the same thing that I know that I'm doing here on earth, because she's working with other individuals in heaven that lost their life to domestic violence.
Excellent. Now, what that illustrates to me is the full circle of life. Because as the earth is a circle, I believe spirituality is also. So if you look at it from a standpoint of how do I become all right with something, right? If I want to totally improve myself, I don't do a 360-degree change, because that means I'm right back where I started.
Yes.
But if I do a 180-degree change, that means I'm further away from the place where I started from. But when you talk about grief and losses, we want to turn the process of grief into an attribute, a positive thing. And I believe that was his initial intent, to allow us to go through the manifestation of humanity, to say that I feel the loss, I don't understand it, God. Please enlighten me to your will for me and the thing that was lost. And also to allow me to understand your authority once again.
Yes.
Now, once I get to that place where I'm not in the blame game anymore, had this happened, that should have happened, things of that nature, I'm at the place where I recognize your authority. Mm-hmm. Now my loss becomes a gain, as you just spoke upon, with your daughter's activity and yours coinciding in both spiritual realms. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've known in my practice and been taught throughout life is my view of things changes as I grow, spiritually, physically, mentally. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, if I return to my childhood home and look at the front door, it used to be a giant door when I was 5. But now I'm 55, and it's just a regular sized door.
Yeah.
Right? The door hasn't changed. I have.
Right.
Okay? I've grown. My vision is more clearer. My size is equal somewhat to the door. It's the same with grief. Grief allows us a process to take a loss as it is presented, which is totally against our belief. So we deny its existence. Mm-hmm. Then we get angry because we can't control it. So what do? We bargain. Oh my God, God, if you do this for me, I won't do that again. Or had this not happened, this would not have happened. Had I been a better person, this may not have happened to that person. All those things are putting us in a position of authority that we really don't have.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So as we get to the depression, that's kind of the cleansing moment where our superior power says, here's the reality. The bargaining didn't work. Yeah. And you're now sad about it. Yeah. But lean that onto your understanding. Yeah. Right? And once we stop leaning towards what we know to be what we desire as an outcome,
yeah,
then we can see God's work in it.
Yes.
You know, I recently went through a loss. I had a cousin, a very astute young man. He had some trials and tribulations. He's lost his dad at an early age. So all the guys in my family adopted him as our own sons. And he was such a jokester and a cavalier young man. He was a straight A student. He was the captain of the football team. He was a freshman in college. He came home, went to a neighborhood block party, and got caught in the crossfire of a gang war and was instantly killed.
Mm-hmm.
The entire city, because he was very well known, started a process of mourning, not just for that individual, but for all young men in that situation. But what hit me initially was, oh no, not him.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of young men don't get killed in the street.
Right.
You know, the denial piece. And, well, was he there in gang related incidents? No. He was an innocent bystander, you know. And then comes the anger. Well, whoever did it needs to pay. And we need some retribution. And then comes the bargaining. You know, well, is it because of something that we did or didn't do that precluded him being in that situation? You know, all of these thoughts start to come through as we juggle and fight with our own mortality. Our mortality, this is really a test of it. Our mortality tells us that we are mere mortals. We don't control the outcomes of life. We participate. We're responsible for our efforts. But the outcome belongs to a power greater than all of us.
Yeah, that's right.
So once we move towards the depression piece and we had the funeral, what happened, like it happens at a lot of funerals, especially in the black community, all the relatives show up. Folks you haven't seen in 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations at the repast went from, woe is we for the death of our loved one, to, do you remember how we used to be when we were kids?
Yeah.
These happier times start to evolve out of conversations. And God shows up.
Yes.
And he says, this death has brought us together as they normally do. But then what is our job as a result of grief? Our job, I believe, is to take the occurrence to provide relief for ourselves further on in our lives, to understand that we can't live on an island.
Mm-hmm.
We needed all of those relatives in one place to feel good again, to see God's love in all of those faces.
Yes.
So we can remember all of the good times, so we can see his presence
Mm-hmm.
in our lives.
Wow.
And that's that acceptance piece at the end of grief. Now, here's the thing, though. When you lose something that is permanently lost, it is permanently lost. But the feelings will reoccur possibly. You can hear a song that reminds you of that individual.
Mm-hmm.
You can drive past a site. You can revisit an event.
Yes.
You can get a whiff of a smell, an odor.
Mm-hmm.
Find some old clothing or anything related.
All right. And those were some great examples. And I really enjoyed having you on the show. You have enlightened a whole lot of people on grief and the type of processes that the mind goes through and how to handle grief in a healthy way. And with that being said, this is National Domestic Violence Month. I really appreciate you being a special friend to me with my healing process as well. And I would like to say to everyone who's having a problem with grief or sadness of a loved one, a friend, a coworker, anyone that was a special person in your heart, speak the name of Jesus over every worry, over every stress, over every uncertainty, and every need. There is no greater power than the name Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Good night, and thank you for tuning in to the Destiny Show, the show that heals hearts, minds, and souls.